Let's go right to NBC's Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, what has happened here?
Andrea, this was in a social media post just moments ago. I'm just going to read it directly to you from Matt Gaetz, who, of course, was up on Capitol Hill yesterday meeting with senators toured around by J.D. Vance. This is from Matt Gaetz. Quote, "I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition. There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one. I remain fully committed to see that Donald J. Trump is the most successful president in history. I will forever be honored that President Trump nominated me to lead the Department of Justice, and I'm certain he will save America." Matt Gaetz, 8 days, Andrea, after being nominated, his name being put into the fold for Attorney General of the United States, is dropping out. This all while there was debate within the House Ethics Committee over whether to release the ethics report looking into the allegations that he had had sexual interactions with a minor dating back several years ago. Ultimately, yesterday, the House Ethics Committee was at a standstill, choosing not to release the report at this time. But we know that senators, including some Republicans, were interested in having the details of the underlying allegations and evidence that was in the hands of the House Ethics Committee. Of course, Matt Gaetz turned heads when Donald Trump first picked him. They were on their way from Washington, D.C., aboard Trump's plane back here to Mar-a-Lago 8 days ago when the decision was made by Donald Trump in flight to nominate Gaetz in a surprising fashion to lead the Department of Justice. Of course, these were all allegations that the Department of Justice had looked into. People like Speaker Kevin McCarthy had publicly stated just this year that he thought that Matt Gaetz would eventually be in jail because of the underlying evidence that was in the hands of House ethics members. But now you fast forward here, I think that this is really the first time in which you see Donald Trump, who made the case that he learned a lot from his first administration and wanted to surround himself by loyal cabinet members, it came to a roadblock up on Capitol Hill. It was going to take just 4 Republican senators to block his confirmation. And there was hesitancy among many of them about not only the underlying allegations against him, but also the way in which he would potentially use and wield the powers of the Department of Justice. He had promised to root out what he called the deep state. And there was concern about political prosecutions, that he would go and not only remove individuals from within Department of Justice career prosecutors, but also try to go and investigate and convene grand juries to bring indictments against perceived enemies of Donald Trump. But now we are at the point where Matt Gaetz has removed himself here from this confirmation process.
Breaking news here right now on a day where President-elect Trump has dropped his Attorney General nominee, Matt Gaetz, who formerly publicly withdrew today. And now, moments ago here, we just got President-elect Trump announcing a new selection for Attorney General, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. She was a lawyer who has worked alongside Donald Trump's impeachment defense lawyers at the first impeachment. So she played that role for then President Trump. In a new post that we got here, 6:28 p.m. Eastern from Donald Trump's Truth Social, he says he is announcing former Attorney General of Florida, Pam Bondi, as our, quote, next Attorney General of the United States. And he cites her work as a prosecutor for nearly, quote, 20 years. A contrast, of course, to Matt Gaetz's inexperience. And he says she was, quote, very tough on violent criminals and made the streets safe for Florida families. He goes on, and this is notable given the controversies. Donald Trump, in this statement, says, quote, the partisan DOJ has been weaponized against me. Not anymore. Pam will refocus the DOJ to its intended purpose. We are following this breaking story. It came just moments ago here as we were covering the other DOJ news with Donald Trump's other first pick for AG, dropping out, Matt Gaetz. And we're joined by Juanita Tolliver, who was covering that story with us. Welcome back. This is that kind of breaking news night. Your thoughts on the fast naming of a replacement?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind, Ari, is loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. It's my understanding that Pam Bondi has been right there, yes, Kendrick, right there with Trump on his super PAC for the 2024 election. She helped participate in his legal contestation of the 2020 election and vote counting in that election. as well as apparently engaging in some of his previous cases down in Florida. And so I feel like she is someone who Donald Trump fully expects to be able to pick up the phone and call and do his bidding. Remember, this is a behavior and approach that Trump attempted with William Barr, but apparently Barr had a threshold that prompted him to stop doing Trump's bidding around his push around 2020 election and overturning the efforts to overturn the election. But Pam Bondi seems to be someone that he's plucked from Florida. We know he is a Florida man, but he's plucked because he's familiar with her and fully expects her to go from his super PAC now into the DOJ to do his bidding, which we know includes cleaning house over at DOJ for anyone who's been critical of him.
Stay with me, Juanita. I want to bring back Jason Johnson. You may remember him from such news events as covering the DOJ 10 minutes ago. Welcome back, Jason.
Thanks, Ari.
It's a big news night. I'm going to let you get in here, but I'll tell viewers, because I always try to keep it as real and frank as possible. This is how this works. We did book these two guests for a different Attorney General nominee story, but I don't think either of you knew that this was breaking. The timestamp on Donald Trump's statement tonight, 6:28 p.m. Eastern, naming Pam Bondi. I want to add a couple more details on that because it's a breaking story, and then Jason bring you in here. There is a distinction that everyone should understand about this Attorney General nominee versus Matt Gaetz. Many people, experts, nonpartisan officials, as well as Republicans, noted that Gaetz had essentially no experience as a prosecutor or in the kind of legal managerial work that anyone would do at any leadership level at DOJ, let alone the top post of Attorney General of the United States. The contrast to Ms. Bondi is she does have that kind of experience, much more traditional in what you would see in a top DOJ post, because she was the top law enforcement official in the state of Florida, and she has over 15 years experience in that role and other roles as a prosecutor. If you remember Kamala Harris running for president and talking about being a prosecutor at the state level, this is that kind of job. And so in that experience, it is much more of a traditional role, something that the Senate Judiciary Committee and others who vet these kind of nominees would see as a positive, as experience. The flip side, which our guest Juanita just mentioned, is unlike traditional attorneys general, this is an individual who's very tied politically to Donald Trump, the loyalty that he has talked about. And while there is nothing disqualifying about working on an impeachment defense, it positions her not as someone who is a nonpartisan state-level prosecutor ready to rise up to the DOJ, but someone who's already been in those really searing partisan battles over Donald Trump's conduct in history. And you want generally an attorney general who is not overly tied to past partisan positions, even when they intersect, for example, with politics and law in Washington. So that's one update I wanted to give and bring you back in, Jason. I say that with all accuracy and fairness, on paper, her state-level experience is much closer to what presidents in both parties have sought at the DOJ. That's a huge difference with Matt Gaetz. The political part, though, is different. Right. And then what I bring to you is, and Juanita mentioned it, you have that political history, and you have a proposed number two, a deputy attorney general who recently handled Donald Trump's criminal defense. So if this were the team, and they have to go through vetting and confirmation, but if this were the team, this would be two of the most politically defensive lawyers of the personal capacity of an incoming president we've ever seen running DOJ at the same time.
All right, I completely agree. And quite frankly, my thought is that after Gaetz dropped out, it would be essentially somebody from Trump's legal team. It would be like a Jay Sekulow or somebody like that. I assume that's where he would get these people from. Unlike William Barr, even going back to when we were all kids and like Janet Reno, right? Occasionally attorney generals try to behave like they are not the personal lawyer of the president of the United States. That is completely out the window. Pam Bondi is exactly what I was saying in the last segment that we should all fear, because she's competent. We may not agree with her ideologically, but she actually knows how to do this job. So if anyone on the Democratic side or anyone who cared about liberty or justice was thinking, well, maybe Matt Gaetz will screw this up and that'll give us some time. No, Pam Bondi knows what she's doing. She knows what she's doing about immigration. Remember, Florida is one of those states that's been very aggressive about migrants and deportation and moving people to different states and everything else like that. Florida has enacted all sorts of rules and laws to curtail students and what they can do on campuses and finding legal justifications for manipulating education money. She is a dangerous and effective pick, and that's frankly worse than what we would have got with Matt Gaetz, even with the deplorable moral background that he has.
Yeah, and I want to discuss that with a little more depth with both of you, including her record on civil rights, LGBTQ rights, and other issues that are front and center at the DOJ, and which we know were also big campaign issues this cycle. So I'm going to ask both of you to hang with me. I've been very clear with viewers. This is breaking news. Our guests are going to stay. But I'm going to go one-on-one and check in with someone who's been following all of the transition news very closely. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard live from Mar-a-Lago. I got a couple of questions for you, Vaughn, but first I'll let you report out what you're hearing and what you think is important on what has been a very active day of transition changes.
Right, Ari. If I could just kind of give you a sense of how this is going here at this point, because of Donald Trump's lack of telegraphing on so many of these picks and making them like the Matt Gaetz pick on the fly on his airplane as he was coming back here to Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach with Matt Gaetz announcing his pick, surprising and turning the heads of everybody. I was with a fellow reporter just about a block from where I'm standing now, and that reporter says, Pam Bondi, he picked Pam Bondi, and my reaction was, for what? And I don't say that out of a disrespect to Pam Bondi, the longtime attorney general from Florida here, but because Pam Bondi's name was not in the mix here, at least publicly, of all of the litany of names that we were talking about to fill this capacity. She's somebody that, as far as my understanding of her history, does not have experience in the Department of Justice, yet she served here. She defended Donald Trump during his impeachment proceedings. She has been a frequent presence over the last 5 years on cable TV, particularly Fox and other right-wing outlets, defending Donald Trump from during the course of his indictment to the two different impeachment proceedings he went through. So clearly, I think in Pam Bondi, I think there's a lot of questions that she'll undoubtedly face during the confirmation proceedings. But Ari, as you guys were just talking about, I think that there's also the question of especially to what extent will Pam Bondi's loyalty extend to her going and seeking out political investigations into his perceived enemies, and will she be able to withstand throughout the course of his administration to any pressures or desires that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, wants her to execute on in the position as the country's top prosecutor.
Yeah, and let's dig into what you're reporting and what's striking here, because I don't mean to sound quaint or old-fashioned, but in Donald Trump's first term and most incoming presidencies, even, shall we say, disruptive, untraditional ones, there's a fair amount of vetting and thought that goes into selections. It is possible that the lack of vetting of several of these candidates is going to complicate the process, which, if you're a Donald Trump fan, that's a negative, because you'd like to see qualified people come in to competently carry out the agenda. We're reporting on the problems that ended Gaetz's nomination today. Pete Hegseth has had some problems that were apparently surprises to the Trump team. And so what you're telling us right now tonight is that this came fast enough that it doesn't sound like, to your, at least what you understand, that there was a sufficient or extensive debate, discussion, and vetting process. I mean, you just had a candidate go lose partly over vetting.
Right. And as far as we're aware, those memorandums of understanding with the GSA have still not been signed by this Trump transition team, meaning that they have not agreed to go through FBI background checks or security clearances for any of these cabinet picks or nominees. There is no federal funding that is going to this transition, because it will require them to sign financial disclosures about private money that they are getting and potential conflicts of interest. So really, Mar-a-Lago is sort of operating on its own island, if you will, in very literal and metaphorical ways here. I think that this is, for this operation, it's not just Pete Hegseth, it's not just Matt Gaetz, right, over sexual misconduct and sexual assault allegations, but you just take Linda McMahon. Her husband, Vince McMahon, in WWE are under Department of Justice investigation as we speak for allegedly knowing about sex trafficking by a WWE employee. And there's questions over the extent to which Pam Bondi, in this capacity, how she would use the DOJ. There's, I think, a series of questions about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as well, who has a deep, difficult history. I think that we as reporters have tried to make our way through, but a lot of questions still outstanding. So I think, Ari, this has been a very accelerated week of announcements compared to 8 years ago, when he steadily, over the course of weeks, or even compared to the Biden administration, over the course of 2 months, rolled out his picks. So I think that this, if you will, this will allow for public scrutiny for the next 2 months because of his accelerated pace of doing this, but through at least the more formal, typical channels of the federal government and the investigative bodies, which have usually helped these transitions, I think it may take more of a public or journalistic look at these individuals to determine the extent to which these confirmation proceedings will be fruitful for them or not.
Did you talk about the allegations in the police report, the sexual assault allegations?
We weren't specific, but since no charges were brought to the authorities, we have only the press reports.
Should you have gotten into some of those specifics? Would that be a more fulsome adjudication of his nomination?
We're looking to have a fulsome.
We'll be looking to have a fulsome something. Hi again, everybody. 5 o'clock in New York. That's the incoming chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. His name's Roger Wicker, and he is from Mississippi. He is among the senators meeting with Donald Trump's pick to head the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth. He was on the Hill today, seemingly agreeing that a more fulsome look into Hegseth is what's needed, considering that last night the Monterey, California Police Department released the full record of the 2017 police investigation in which a woman alleged that Hegseth sexually assaulted her. Hegseth denied the assault occurred, saying the sexual encounter was consensual and no charges were filed, but he did confirm that the woman was paid an undisclosed amount of money in a settlement. The newly released 22-page police report includes some disturbing and very graphic details. It says that an emergency room nurse contacted the police after a woman came in saying she had been sexually assaulted by a man days prior, who she identified as Pete Hegseth. The woman, identified only as Jane Doe, said she met Hegseth at a hotel where he was speaking at an event she attended. Jane Doe said that night Hegseth was acting inappropriately with women, and she actually confronted him about that behavior. She acknowledged consuming much more alcohol than normal that day and said things became fuzzy, but then said she found herself in an unknown room. She told police that Hegseth took her phone from her and then physically blocked her attempt to leave the room. She detailed the assault and remembered saying no a lot. The report also includes Hegseth's account of what happened that night. He told police he had drank beer and that what had transpired with the woman was consensual. His lawyer said in a statement today, this, quote, "This police report confirms what I've said all along. The incident was fully investigated and police found the allegation to be false, which is why no charges were filed," end quote. But that is not what any page of the police report actually says. In fact, they do not give a reason for not charging Pete Hegseth. The details in the new report assure this will complicate what has already been a challenging confirmation process ahead for Mr. Hegseth. Earlier on the Hill, he was questioned about the allegation.
Did you sexually assault a woman in Monterey, California?
I have, as far as the media is concerned, it's very simple. The matter was fully investigated, and I was completely clear, and that's what I'm leaving.
That's where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath is here. Also joining us, Professor of History at NYU, Ruth Ben-Ghiat is here. And former RNC spokesman, host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller, is still with us. Amy McGrath, your thoughts?
Well, the first thing is, if Pete Hegseth, what would happen if this happened while he was in the military and the military found out about it? What would happen to a rank and file person in the military, okay? As an officer, people need to know that you basically would not be promoted. You would probably lose your command opportunities. And even if there was a settlement, why? Why is that? Because you can't set the example. Nicole, we have a sexual assault problem in the military already. And how are we going to have a leader who's known to have these sexual assault allegations? The military doesn't want to promote people like that. And so it's about leadership and it's about character. And I certainly hope that these members of Congress on the Republican side who actually care about the military, many of them have served in the military, they understand these items or values of integrity and character. I hope they reject this nomination.
I've read the police report for a variety of reasons. Some of the most graphic things, they are available. It's been released by the police department. There's some redactions, but you get a pretty clear sense of this. Ruth, Jane Doe went to the emergency room and requested what gets shorthanded as a rape kit. It's an exam, and it proves the existence of semen. She took that test, and that is a known fact. The emergency room contacted the police. That is a known fact. Charges were not pressed. But again, as with Matt Gaetz, what's fascinating about Trump 2.0 is that one alleged child sex trafficker, maybe it's just a guy he really, really likes, one alleged sex trafficker, one investigated for sexual assault TV host who paid money to the woman who made the allegations, and a vice president who believes women should stay in violent marriages instead of getting divorced. Feels like a brand that Donald Trump is very comfortable being associated with. What do you think?
Yeah, well, part of the Harris Walz campaign was We Aren't Going Back. And the Trump-Vance administration is, we are going to take you back. And this reflects, these appointments or nominations reflect values of male domination, the idea that the strong man doesn't have to ask for consent, either in politics or in the bedroom. And this is a kind of lawless, masculinity and misogyny. Pete Hegseth doesn't believe women should be in combat. And that's a very important fact about him, too. I see why this came out after they had nominated him. And I see, why they wanted him, because they are considering a very radical shift for the military's function in American life to be used domestically. This is a very big deal. And so who better than a smooth talking, practiced dissembler, because he works for Fox News, to sell this to the American people. But we also have to see what values these individuals as individuals bring to the table. And here he fits the Trump worldview, which is machismo and misogyny.
Tim Miller, your thoughts on any and all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe an important perspective or one way to look at this, to just show how absurd of a nomination this is let's look at this story from Pete Hegseth's perspective. Like, here's what Pete Hegseth is pitching people what happened in this situation. In this situation, he's drunk at a conservative conference. At 1:30 a.m., he's screaming about how he has freedom of speech and berating a hotel staffer. Then he takes a woman back to his hotel room for what he says is consensual sex. At the moment that that's happening, he is in between marriages. I think actually he's still technically married to his second wife, but that marriage is they're getting divorced because he had a child with someone that works for him, who then became his third wife. And in the meantime, he's drunkenly, doing whatever with the woman, Jane Doe, who's alleged sexual assault and what he says is consensual at a hotel in California, that he's under the age of 40. I mean, I'm not judging anybody that's been divorced or whatever. Like, this guy's life is a disaster. And this guy's personal life is a total disaster. And he has a love child, and he's in between marriages, and he's drunkenly shouting at hotel staff, and he's having another affair, meanwhile, with not one of the three women that are his wives. And so it's like, somebody whose personal life is that much of a disaster, would you want them in one of the most important jobs in the world? I mean, maybe if they had the resume for it and they demonstrated the judgment in their work life that they haven't shown in their personal life. But he's a talk show host. He's a weekend morning talk show host. Like, this is a preposterous pick on every level. Like, he's not qualified for the job, and the judgment that he's shown privately leaves much to be desired. The only cover that he had for this nomination was the existence of Matt Gaetz, which is now gone because the people on the Hill, the Republicans on the Hill, hated Matt Gaetz. So now that this sees the light of day, I don't know what the pitch. I just gave you the pitch for Pete Hegseth. Like, what is the pitch that he has to offer that he should be in charge of the Pentagon?
The second day in a row, Senator J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, spent the day chaperoning an unqualified man seriously accused of sex crimes around the Capitol. 2 days in a row. Asking senators to look past it all and vote for the guy to take one of the most powerful jobs in the entire world. Yesterday, Vance accompanied Matt Gaetz and tried to sell fellow Republican senators on his bid to be attorney general. And as we were just reporting, that didn't go so well. Well, today, Vance was doing the same for Fox News host Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick to be Secretary of Defense. In fact, it was outside Vance's Senate office that Hegseth gave this very lawyerly response to a reporter asking about the latest troubling allegations against him.
Snitching sexually assault woman in Monterey, California.
I have, as far as the media is concerned, it's very simple. The matter was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared, and that's what I'm leaving.
You'll be shocked to learn it isn't quite that simple. Hegseth has not been charged, but he wasn't completely cleared, in his words. In fact, the allegations are as serious as they come. In 2017, the allegation is Hegseth sexually assaulted a woman he met at a political conference he spoke at in California for Republican women. This is a conference that, fellow conservatives, fellow Republicans. Now, those allegations first came to light last week after the Washington Post obtained a memo written by a friend of the accuser and sent to the Trump transition team to alert them of the case. Like, heads up here, guys. The memo sent to the Trump team said that the woman identified in the memo only as Jane Doe was there with the California Federation of Republican Women. The woman was staying at the hotel with her small children and her husband, according to the memo, which laid out the woman's complaint. Now, the Trump team did not even know about the allegation before Hegseth was announced as the Pentagon nominee, according to the Post. But since then, Hegseth's attorney has said in a statement that the nominee did in fact have sex with the 30-year-old married conservative staffer, but that it was consensual. And he added that Hegseth paid the woman an undisclosed amount as part of a non-disclosure agreement because he feared that revelation of the matter would result in his immediate termination from Fox. Hegseth did not get an NDA, however, with the Monterey, California City Attorney's Office. And while they pressed no charges against him, they did provide reporters with a 22-page police report on the incident. That complaint originated with an emergency room nurse who was required to report the incident to police after the accuser went to the hospital to request a sexual assault examination. The details in that complaint are upsetting. The accuser, who's called Jane Doe in the report, was socializing with other women at the conference when Hegseth joined them. She, quote, stated she observed Hegseth acting inappropriately with the women at the conference. Hegseth would rub the women on their legs, and Jane Doe thought his actions were inappropriate. In fact, the accuser had texted an unnamed friend, quote, that Hegseth was giving off a creeper vibe. The woman said she remembered walking out of the bar and assumed Hegseth followed her because she argued with Hegseth near the pool. The argument was about Hegseth's actions with the women at the conference. At that point, she remembered Hegseth telling her that he was a nice guy. She said, quote, the next memory she had was when she was in an unknown room. Jane Doe did not know where she was and how she got to the room. Hegseth was in the room with her. She said she got up and tried to leave the room, but Hegseth blocked the door with his body. Jane Doe remembered saying no a lot. The report then details the woman's recollection of being underneath him as he sexually assaulted her. I'm not going to read you that part of the report, but according to her account, Hegseth's dog tags from his military service were hovering over her face. Now, again, Hegseth denies all this. He says they had consensual sex. He's even suggested that the woman was the aggressor in this encounter. Hegseth clearly knows what a liability this story is. I mean, there's a police report, an accusation of sexual assault, a woman going to a hospital. And he knows it because he literally paid for it to go away to preserve his job on the Fox and Friends couch. Now, the Trump team was reportedly completely blindsided by allegations and then blindsided again by the police report. People familiar with the discussions told the Wall Street Journal today. that Trump's transition team did not know that Hegseth had gotten a copy of that police report, something he apparently hadn't told them. They did not know this about the guy Trump picked to run the entire United States Department of Defense, largest employer in America, one of the largest bureaucracies in human history. What else didn't they know? But here's the thing, as with Matt Gaetz, putting all of this beside, even before these allegations came out, Pete Hegseth was manifestly unqualified to manage the Pentagon and its nearly 3 million civilian and military employees. A man who's never run anything bigger than a right-wing AstroTurf veterans group funded by the Koch brothers. A man who was removed from a security detail protecting Joe Biden's inauguration and ultimately left the National Guard after the D.C. Guard's head of physical security flagged Hegseth as a potential insider threat, citing a tattoo of Hegseth as a symbol common among white supremacist and militant groups. Hegseth says it's merely a Christian tattoo. This week, a military official familiar with Hegseth's service in the D.C. Guard told NBC News that, quote, he had zero leadership capability. He had his own agenda. He didn't care what the rules were. He didn't care what the parameters were. He was just doing what he needed to get ahead. Senator Tammy Duckworth is a Democrat from Illinois who served on the Armed Services Committee. She's an Iraq War veteran and Purple Heart recipient, and she joins me now. Senator, first I want to start on some of the revelations around these allegations, which I think both speak to character, clearly, if they're true, and he denies them. But also there's an institutional issue here with how the Department of Defense deals with such accusations and justice in those cases. What is your reaction to what's been reported so far about the allegations against Mr. Hegseth?
I mean, it's insane. He already was manifestly unqualified to be Secretary of Defense, but it's insane that Donald Trump wants this man who admits, as you said, he paid off a woman who accused him of rape to lead the Department of Defense. Remember now, we've been working for over a decade on military sexual trauma, getting to finally a place where the military is doing better. And it is really a slap in the face to the men and women who wear the uniform of this great nation, should this man be confirmed to be Secretary of Defense. Not just because he's really unqualified, but these sexual assault allegations are something that's going to give a lot of people pause. And let me tell you, if I'm, if my girls are 6 and 10 now, but if they were to come to me at 18 and say, hey, I want to go join the military, I'd think twice if that's who the Secretary of Defense is.
Speaking of them joining the military, he has some pretty sharp views on the role of women in the armed forces, particularly women in combat. I'm sure you've seen this clip. I'm sure it hasn't played for you, but I'm going to play it again for the audience. This is him speaking on a podcast about his views on women in combat. Take a listen.
You got to fire, you got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you got to fire this. I mean, obviously, you're going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever that was involved in any of the DEI woke, it's got to go.
You don't like women in combat?
No. I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles.
Obviously, you served in combat, quite famously. I think I know where you stand on this, but what does it mean for the institution to have a Secretary of Defense on the record saying that?
What it means is you have a Secretary of Defense who does not understand modern warfare. This is not the Revolutionary War. This isn't even like Vietnam, where you have front lines. The most casualties we took in Iraq was during convoy operations. Over 50% of our casualties in Iraq was during performing convoy operations. Driving a truck is a job that women have been doing since World War I. If you were in the Green Zone in Baghdad if you were a cook in the Green Zone, you were in combat. You took incoming missile fire all the time. And so this just shows us, not only is it a morale issue, but it's a fact that he doesn't understand modern warfare. If he thinks that there's a way to keep women out of combat, not to mention that there are over 200,000 women serving in uniform today in the military. We couldn't go to war without our women. So it really just points to how deeply unqualified he is to lead the Department of Defense.
It also strikes me, I mean, again, aside from his views, aside from the allegations, just purely on experience. Like, I can think of, a lot of folks that I know that are very, very sharp and who have served. I wouldn't necessarily say they should run the Department of Defense. Like, it is basically the largest entity you can run anywhere in the U.S. And I guess, what do you think the qualifications are affirmatively, like that he lacks? Obviously past secretaries have been people who have some experience basically managing large bureaucracies.
Yeah, I mean, he was a platoon leader, which is 35 guys. We're talking about going from managing 35 people to 3 million people with a budget in this year's NDAA's budget is $923 billion.
Pretty high.
Pretty high. You can't just put anybody to go do that. I would be worried about Hexbeth running a McDonald's. Something, let alone the Department of Defense. This is absolutely insane. And my questions for him, you talked about advice and consent. When he comes in front of me as part of the Senate Armed Services Committee, it's going to be focused on what experience do you have? Have you done logistics? Do you understand how to do supply chain? Do you understand manufacturing? What do you know about targeting? What do you know about a battalion, a division, army operations? And he's not going to be able to answer any of that because he operated at such a low level. And he has no experience even in the civilian world. It's not like he's been CEO of a major corporation. He's done none of that. And we're going to entrust this man with the lives of the most patriotic, heroic Americans we have, the men and women who wear the uniform of this great nation. It would be malpractice and it would be a crime to confirm this man to be Secretary of Defense.
I want to just show, so today Matt Gaetz, who I think a lot of people on Capitol Hill across the ideological spectrum thought was a poor choice to be Attorney General of the United States. And there are many people on both sides of the aisle, particularly Republicans, who hold him in ill will. There were basically at least 5 no votes. Susan Collins, the new Senator-elect John Curtis, who was replacing Mitt Romney, comes out of Utah. Mitch McConnell, of course. Markwayne Mullin, who quite famously went on that long rant about essentially what a scumbag he thought Matt Gaetz was, and Lisa Murkowski. I guess my question to you is, where do you see this right now? I mean, I think this is, for you, this is pretty existential. This is a person who just has no business having this job. He doesn't quite have the same reputation on Capitol Hill because Matt Gaetz is a singular entity. But where do you think this stands?
Well, let me say this. As the mom of 2 young girls, as I said, ages 6 and 10, I don't think Hexbeth could pass a background check to be a babysitter, let alone pass a background check to be Secretary of Defense, especially since he has admitted to paying off an accuser who accuses him of sexual assault. Would you want to put this man in charge of taking care of your kids, let alone 3 million personnel in the Department of Defense? I think not.